Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sip. Semangat sore anak-anak. Ya, anak-anak, alhamdulillah sore ini kita dapat rezeki ya. Kita mendapat kehormatan ada dosen tamu dari Afrika Selatan ya. Namanya Prof Munir Abdul Rauf ya. Ini Prof Munir. Nanti kalau beliau akan menyampaikan mengenai Islamic Inheritance Law, ya, hukum kewarisan. Nanti ada waktu untuk tanya jawab, ya. Jadi silahkan disimak apa yang ingin ditanyakan. Kita selama ini banyak mendapatkan dosen tamu dari Amerika, Australia, Asia, ya, Eropa. Nah ini baru nih, jauh dari Afrika, ya. Saya tadinya berpikir orangnya kayak orang Afrika ya, hitam geriting-geriting, ternyata handsome ya, putih ya. Nah, jadi dan masih muda. Oke. Nah, sebelum kita mulai, kebetulan nih ada teman kita, teman Anda ya, anak kami lah ya, dari kelas asas hukum Islam D. D mana D? Ya, teman Anda kan yang meninggal semalam? Belum tahu ya? Namanya Zafara. Ya, kemarin meninggal di rumah sakit UI. Sepertinya karena ada yang pembuluh darahnya pecah bagaimana? Karena terlalu lelah, ya. Nah, sebelum kita mulai, mari kita mengirimkan bagi yang beragama Islam ya, mengirimkan suratul Al-Fatihah untuk almarhumah Nanda Zafara. Saya kurang tahu juga siapa nama bapaknya ya. Ya udahlah, binti Nanda Zafara Desverina Putri ya. Semoga almarhumah husnul khotimah, mendapatkan tempat terbaik di sisi Allah, diampuni segala dosanya, serta keluarga yang ditinggalkan, ayah, bunda, dan saudara-saudaranya diberikan Allah keikhlasan, kesabaran, dan kekuatan. Ya, mari kita membacakan suratul Al-Fatihah. Ya, mulai Al-Fatihah. Amin. Ya, terima kasih anak-anak semua atas kiriman Al-Fatihahnya kepada teman Anda, Nanda Zafara Desverina Putri. Nah, selanjutnya sebelum saya dimulai, saya akan membacakan dahulu CV dari Prof Munir Abdul Rauf. Beliau ini sudah pernah the Western Cape, lalu the University of Western Cape juga ada berapa tahun ini, lalu Islamic University of Madinah, Saudi Arabia. Nah, beliau dan sekarang ini menjadi Attorney of the High Court of South Africa. Apa ininya, majoringnya Marriage Officer of the Department of Home Affairs of South Africa, jadi hukum perkawinan, dan Sworn Translator of the High Court of South Africa. Berarti jago nih bahasa Inggrisnya, ya. Oke. Nah, juga beliau sudah banyak mendapatkan penghargaan baik di bidang hukum keluarga dan juga sebagai pengacara, ya, dan juga beliau merupakan Positions and Membership African Journal of Gender and Religion, peer groupnya ya, peer reviewer, banyak Harvard Law School Journal, Harvard Journal of Islamic Law, Highlands Waqaf Trust, International Peace College, Islam and Christian Muslim Relations, International Network of Scholars Researching, Muslim Judicial Council, enggak semua saya sampaikan ya, Muslim Judicial Council Fatwa Department, Mediation and Arbitration Department, ya. Nah, dan lain-lain, obiter juga, dan beliau ini banyak sekali menulis ya, diantaranya apa nih? Analysis of the judgment in Women's Legal Center Trust versus President of the Republic of South Africa and others. Lalu ada juga mengenai analysis of difference of religion as a disqualification from inheriting in terms of the Islamic law succession. Lalu ada juga yang terakhir apa nih? Analysis of the Divorce Act 70 of 1979 and its application to marriage concluded in terms of Islamic law. Itu masih banyak lagi yang lainnya. Untuk mempersingkat waktu, mari kita mulai aja. Silahkan disimak baik-baik karena otak kita bekerja dua kali. Dari dengar bahasa Inggris, diterjemahkan dulu ke bahasa Indonesia, baru bisa dipahami. Ya, saya yakin semuanya pasti sudah bisa memahami apa yang akan disampaikan oleh Profesor Munir Abdul Rauf. Please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin. Sayyidina wa habibina wa maulana Muhammadin sallallahu alaihi wasallam wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Professor, for that beautiful introduction. And I greet one and all in the universal greetings of love, mercy, and peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today, I'll be speaking in English, and I hope the majority of you can understand. And I'll try to speak slowly, inshallah, just because my dialect is a bit different to the normal dialect. So I hope you will you'll be patient with me. My topic of discussion is the Islamic inheritance law in South Africa. All right, so where is South Africa? South Africa is a continent, and right at the bottom of the continent, you'll find that there is a place referred to as the southernmost tip of Africa. It goes like almost V, and right at the bottom, you'll find there's a place referred to as Cape Town, right? And that is where I am, and I'm here on the photo. There's a part of this university, the University of the Western Cape, right? And I am a law lecturer in the Department of Private Law at the University of the Western Cape. South Africa is quite unique as where the point of the tip of Africa you find on the one side there is the Indian Ocean, which is warm, Benguela current, and on the other side there is the Atlantic Ocean, which is a cold current, right? It's similar to what is stated in the Quran. Some state it is that مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان, where there is the meeting of the two seas. Other states it's the meeting of the rivers and the sea and so forth, but some say it is clear. As law students, you might know Nelson Mandela, right? Now, Nelson Mandela was the first democratically elected president of South Africa. So in South Africa, what happened was, initially we had something referred to as apartheid. Now, apartheid is similar to what is happening in Palestine currently. And for that reason, South Africa has gone to the International Court of Justice to put forth a claim against Israel for the crime of genocide. Right? So the background of South Africa is as we were an apartheid state. To give an example, we had in a room like this different seats. And as you are sitting in your seats, there might be someone who has light of complexion, another person might be a bit more darker of complexion, and so forth. In South Africa, if you were white of complexion, there was preferential treatment and you could sit in special places. If you were a darker color, you had to go sit at the back. You had to go to a different toilet. You had to go sit in a different part of the beach and so forth. So they treated people differently based on their color and their race and ethnicity and so forth. Now, to cut a very long story short, when the South African government, as it is now, decided to take over and throw over apartheid, to basically bring an end to apartheid, then we found that there was a newly elected government, which was at that point in time the African National Congress. The reason why I'm bringing this forth is, as law students, one of the significant parts of South Africa's experience and history is that prior to the Constitution, that came out as a result of the change in government, the change of the regime of apartheid to a democracy, it brought about a change where you had certain freedoms that you did not have in the past. Right. But before getting to that constitution, I will focus on now, South Africa has a link to where you are here today. You are in Indonesia. The indigenous population, the Khoisan, the black, the people that speak, right? That's how they speak, with the dialects. Later on, people then came from different parts of the world, Dutch and so forth. And only many years later, there came a scholar to promote Islam, and that is Tuan Yusuf, or Sheikh Yusuf Al-Makassari, right? And he came from Indonesia, somewhere in this vicinity. And that is where Islam started to come into existence in the country referred to as South Africa. Another person that came down was an individual referred to as Tuan Guru, right? And he's also from Indonesia. Now, before he came to South Africa, you can imagine, today we have so many Hufaz right around the world. We have so many Hufaz in Indonesia as well, and many other places. In South Africa, there was not a single Quran. When Tuan Guru was here in Indonesia, what happened was he caused problems. He went against the government. And they then decided that they wanted to get rid of this individual. They wanted to move him away. And they say, let's take this person and let's take him to the furthest most tip of Africa. Let's take him over there and arrest him and have him imprisoned. And that's what they done. They took him to Cape Town. And in Cape Town, there is a small island, right? But maybe 15 minutes with a boat, right? Referred to as Robben Island. And on that island, they then incarcerated Tuan Guru. But Tuan Guru, he memorized the Quran. He understood the Sharia. He understood fiqh. So while he was incarcerated on that island, he then decided to write the Quran from memory. From memory, the Quran from cover to cover. And that very Quran that came from Tuan Guru is the first Quran that was written in South Africa, right? From memory, from a person that was set to basically be imprisoned in South Africa, right? Later on, when he was released, or when he basically left the island, he came to the Cape of Good Hope, Cape Town. And then he established the first madrasa. He said, no, I need to teach these people that are here. And he taught the people to recite the Surat, to recite the Quran. He established the first madrasa, the first Islamic institution in South Africa. And this is where Islamic law comes from. We're getting to the Islamic law of inheritance in South Africa and its application, but it came from here in Indonesia. Later on, he then said, look here, it was illegal to practice religion in South Africa. If you practice religion, you could have been imprisoned. Right? Here we have the right to have Jumu'ah, we have the right to do many things. That was not always the case in South Africa. What happened was, when there was some leeway in the law, it wasn't yet allowed to have religious gatherings. Tuan Guru took use of that, and he then had the first Jumu'ah in South Africa. What you can see here is that when Tuan Yusuf came, there was no Islam being practiced yet, even though he introduced Islam. When Tuan Guru came, he actually established Islam, and he then read the first Quran, then established a madrasa and a masjid. And if you decide to go to Cape Town, you can go to a mosque referred to as Al-Awwal Masjid, or Masjidul Awwal, the first mosque, which is the first mosque in South Africa. Inside the mosque, you'll find that there is a Quran written by Tuan Guru, and that is the first Quran in South Africa. You'll also find that Tuan Guru's family is even here in Jakarta and in certain places. Verse number 11, verse number 12, and verse number 176. Now, when Tuan Guru came to South Africa, and Tuan Yusuf, or Sheikh Yusuf al-Makassari, came to South Africa, they came with an established way of life as far as Islamic law is concerned. As we know, there is a difference between Sharia and fiqh. Can anyone explain what's the difference between Sharia and fiqh? Right. The Sharia would be the primary sources of this deen, right? The Quran and the Sunnah. And however, these primary sources have to be interpreted and applied. And those would be the fiqh opinions and applications, right? The Sharia being the one, and the fiqh being another. The fiqh opinions have later on been embodied in schools of thought or schools of law, like the Shafi'i school of law, the Maliki school of law, the Hanbali school of law, and so forth. And in Indonesia, at least, Tuan Guru as well was following the Shafi'i school of law. And therefore, that is the school of law that is currently practiced in South Africa. The majority of South Africans, they follow the Shafi'i school of law. In the Western Cape, that is where Tuan Guru and Tuan Yusuf actually started off with their propagation of Islam. That is, the bulk of the people are Shafi'i followers. Right. Later on, there came other scholars like Abu Bakr al-Effendi, and that is when the Hanafi school of law was also introduced into South Africa. Today we find that the bulk of South African Muslims follow the Shafi'i and Hanafi schools of law. All right. Now, to understand the current state of affairs in South Africa, right, we're looking at the laws of inheritance, but I want to look at how the laws of inheritance are being applied, and now when you look at the legal system, right, every country around the world, you'll generally find that the laws are either, basically the laws are drafted and written and assented to by the parliament, right? If that happens, it is referred to, right, where the parliament is supreme. Whatever the parliament says, whatever an act of parliament says, the courts, right, the various courts, the judiciary, they must follow those laws, right? That is one thing. So Africa used to be that. So when a law said that if you are black, you must sit behind the bus, right? Or you must go to a certain toilet, and if you broke that law, you can be charged, prosecuted, and thrown into jail. That is because the law is supreme, right? What happened in 1993 was that something happened in South Africa. And they then introduced something referred to as a constitution. And when the constitution came into being, they said that this document here is a supreme law of the Republic. And this is section 2 of the South African Constitution. It says, this constitution is a supreme law of the Republic. Law or conduct inconsistent with it is invalid, and the obligation imposed by it must be fulfilled. Which basically means, and in this constitution, it says there's a right to equality. Everyone is equal before the law. So if there was a law that says that, look here, if you are white, you go to a certain toilet. If you are black, you go to a different toilet. That is discrimination. That goes against equality. On that basis, you can go to a court of South Africa and say that your worship in the magistrate's court, or my lord in a high court, the argument will be made that this is constitutional because it violates section 9 of the Constitution that says everyone has a right to be equal in front of the law. This law is unconstitutional, and if argued correctly, they will then say, yes, we now are scrapping that law, which means that the law is subject to a constitution. Right. So this is a big change to the South African landscape, where we move from a parliamentary supremacy to a constitutional supremacy. And of the rights, there's in this Constitution of 1996, there are many rights. There's a right to freedom of religion, right? So you can practice your religion. No person can say to another person that you cannot practice to be a Muslim. It's not as the situation was when Tuan Guru came to the Cape. You have the right to equality, right? So no person can say no, but because you're black, you can't do certain things, and because you're white, you can do certain things. It was also so bad that if you are of a certain color, even though you had money, you could not go to university. You must have certain privileges, or certain people must speak on your behalf. Box, benches, only for white people. If you're black, go sit on the grass, go sit somewhere else. Right? That was the state of affairs. There was a need to change this. And the world, when they saw this, they were totally against it. They started to boycott South Africa. As we're boycotting Israeli products, they boycotted South Africa. No one wanted to buy things from South Africa because they said that you are an apartheid state. Right? It became so bad that the government said, okay, we have to change things. We have to now allow these people rights. And that is where the South African Constitution has come in, to basically call a long story short. Section 2 of this Constitution says this is the supreme law of the Republic. Right. Now, getting back to the laws of inheritance. Right. So I've had a very lovely meeting this morning with the mother of Dr. Yeni over here, an expert in the Islamic law of inheritance in Indonesia. And she has basically given me a good insight into what's happening in Indonesia concerning the various laws and systems applicable to the laws of succession or the laws of inheritance. However, in this discussion here, I'll be looking at what the position is in South Africa. What happens in the event where a person is a Muslim, right? And the Muslims in South Africa currently is just under 2 million, right? Between 2 and 3 million, right? And in this regard, you have the right to freedom of religion, and those people, those Muslims, constitute 3%. Listen again, 3% of the South African community. So we're not a big amount, but we do have power. And the reason why we have power is based on section, firstly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously. But within the South African context, the legal context, the Constitution says this Constitution is supreme. Any person can challenge anything in this country if they want to do so in a court of law based on constitutional supremacy. Right. Now in South Africa, if you want to draft a will, right, as we know, you have done probably in this course the laws of inheritance. So the laws of inheritance are found in Surah An-Nisa, in the Quran, in chapter number 4, right, verse number 11, 12, and 176. Those are the primary verses of inheritance. And if you want to know what happens to your estate when you pass away, more likely than not, it will be based on those verses. All right. So verse number 11 of Surah An-Nisa speaks about the inheritance of descendants, children, for example, the inheritance of parents. It speaks about the surviving spouses in verse number 12, the widow and the widower. It speaks about uterine siblings in verse number 12. And verse number 106, right at the end of the surah, Allah speaks about the inheritance of siblings, full siblings and uterine siblings, right? This is now according to the majority of scholars. Right. So those are the laws of inheritance. When Tuan Guru came to South Africa, right, he wrote the Quran from memory, and those verses were there. In 1993 and subsequently 1996, we had the constitutions. Under the common law, South Africa basically has a mixed hybrid system. Right? So we have something referred to as the common law, and we have something referred to as Roman Dutch law, and something referred to as English law, and we also have statute. Right? All of this forms South African law. And all of these laws are subject to the South African Constitution. Any of these laws which is violating the Constitution would be invalid. Right. Under the common law, which is now basically based on precedent, the courts, there's something referred to as freedom of testation. Who knows what freedom of testation is? Right. Freedom of testation is where you are allowed to do with your assets as you so wish. That is freedom of testation. Right, you can give your whole estate to your gardener. You can give your whole estate when you pass away to your girlfriend or to your boyfriend. Right, so in South Africa, you are allowed to give your estate or bequeath your estate as you so wish, based on the principle of freedom of testation. Now, if you look at the South African Constitution as well, right? The South African Constitution in section 25, it says there that it guarantees the right to property. So as a South African Muslim, you are allowed to do with your property as you so wish. No one can force you to do with your property something which you don't want to do, obviously with certain limitation. Right, so this right, based on freedom of testation, based on the right to property in the South African Constitution, again, it's limited. Right, it is limited. And I'll look at it. It's limited based on constitution and public policy principles. So you can, for example, give away assets how you wish. But if that which you are doing goes against public policy, if it goes against the South African Constitution, the principles enshrined therein, then it would be deemed to be unconstitutional or against public policy, contra bonus mores. Right. If that be the case, then you cannot give effect to those unconstitutional provisions or those provisions that goes against public policy. Right. The big question is, what is public policy? Right. What is the public policy? I'll give an example. The marriages in South Africa, Muslim marriages, was initially deemed to be against public policy. And if any person can guess why, it would be interesting. The reason why the South African courts in the apartheid regime, they said that if you marry in terms of Islamic law, we will not recognize your marriages at all. And the reason why we won't recognize your marriages, because your marriages is contra bonus mores. It goes against public policy. And the question was asked, now why is it against public policy? The answer was, because you are allowed to marry more than one wife. That's not right. According to the apartheid, they said that if you are allowed, in terms of a regime, to have more than one wife, that is against public policy. Public policy, right, that is what happened prior to 1993. Today, we find that South African law allows marriages where a man is allowed to have more than one wife. It even goes to the point where the feminists in South Africa are arguing, why are we not allowing polyandry? And polyandry is where a wife has more than one husband. I don't know if there's anyone in the audience who would like to have more than one husband, but that is basically what is happening to our society. That is now the morals of our society that changed from one point in time to a different point in time. Another example of public policy. We know that drugs is not allowed. Right now in South Africa, there's one type of drug referred to as marijuana. Has anyone heard of that? Right. There's this group of people, you heard of Bob Marley, right? Bob Marley, and he's a singer, and he also basically, they follow this Rastafarian religion, right? Now, in terms of this religion, they are saying that they are smoking this, not because they want to become intoxicated, but the reason why they are smoking this is because it's part of their religion, right? So that's the argument they made. At my university, where I am teaching at, in the law faculty, there was a student, right? And this student then, he was a Rastafarian, and he then graduated, right? He then wanted to become an attorney of the High Court. Many of you are studying a law degree. And when he made the application, there was an objection against the application. They said, no, but this person is not fit to be a lawyer because he's doing something that goes against the law. He's smoking marijuana. His argument was, but it is part of my religion. Right? This was now after 1993. The court then says, look here, right, after looking at a number of factors, that look here, we cannot allow that. 2024, this year, or 2-3 years back, the same question came before the courts. And the courts then said, look here, I think we should allow these people to smoke marijuana, but only for public use. Oh, sorry, private use. Private use. The point I'm trying to highlight is how public policy changes from one point in time to another point in time. Right. The Constitution also has certain limitations. So you can't just do anything with your property. Section 36 of the Constitution, or of the South African Constitution, you can Google also the South African Constitution and you can find these provisions therein. It basically says that there are certain limitations. So even though you have the right to equality, you have the right to religion, but you can't practice your religion in a way that basically harms other people. So I can't say my religion is that I should basically punch you in the nose. That can't work, because that is now infringing upon the other person's right to privacy and so forth. So your right basically ends where the other person's nose begins. That is basically how we look at these rights that are enshrined in the South African Constitution. All right. So coming back to the laws of succession, the laws of inheritance, there are two ways, right? There are two ways in order to apply the Islamic laws of inheritance. right? Based on the Quran, verse number 11, verse number 12, and verse number 176, right? There are two ways in order to give effect to these provisions. The one way is where you have an Islamic will with Islamic law provisions, right? So let's say the following. I'm a South African Muslim. I live in Cape Town. I have a wife, Zainab, and I have 4 daughters, right? My parents are still alive, and my wife is pregnant. We don't know if it's a son or a daughter. In this case, as per Quranic injunction, verse number 11, mother is entitled to 1/6 each. As the Quran says, وَلِأَبَوَيْهِ لِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمَا السُّدُسُ, right? That each of your parents is entitled to 1/6 of the estate. In kana lahu walad, if you have inheriting descendants. I have children, in this case daughters, the widow inherits 1/8, right? And verse number 11, the 2/3 of the estate, right? So that is what happens with my estate. My wife is pregnant, right? So I don't know if it's a male or a female, right? And that will make a difference. If it is a male, it means that my daughters won't inherit the 2/3, but they will share the remainder of the estate with my son in the proportion of 2:1. If I have another daughter, then she will share that 2/3 with the other 4 siblings, right? So now I know what Islamic law says, right? In South Africa, based on freedom of testation, right? Freedom of testation, I can then draft a will on document on a page, and I can state thereon that I leave behind my estate, and that my estate must be devolved as follows. My mother, if she's alive when I pass away, inherits 1/6. My father inherits 1/6. My wife inherits 1/8, and 2/3 shared between my daughters. If my wife gives birth to a daughter, they share the 2/3. But if, however, it is a son, they share the remainder in the proportion of 2:1. Right? Then I sign the will in the presence of 2 witnesses. Right? Now in South Africa, you can't just draft a will and say, this is my last will and testament. You might know the hadith where you say, do not let 2 nights pass and you have something to bequeath under Islamic law or any wish you have, it must meet requirements as per an act of parliament, and that is now the Wills Act 7 of 1953. You can Google that as well and see what that act says. The act requires that are not beneficiaries of your estate. Right? So that's what the requirement is. And it will be devolved or will be distributed in terms of Sharia. However, it might be problematic in the events has changed. Maybe my father passed away before me, or my mother passed away before me, or maybe I have another wife, or maybe I have one less child or another child, which means that the will that I have drafted and executed today might not be Sharia compliant when I pass away. For that reason, right, I can draft again a will in terms of African law principle 3, stating that this is my last will and testament. I refer to the 2 witnesses signed properly and so forth. But the difference here is that I will then incorporate into the will a clause stating therein that my estate must be distributed in terms of Sharia. So I don't state who my lawful heirs are. I don't state who my beneficiaries are. All I do is I state that the will must be distributed in terms of Sharia. And in order to give effect to this clause, I then state that the Muslim Judicial Council SA, right, which is one of the oldest organizations in South Africa, that they must then draft a document referred to as an Islamic distribution certificate. And that certificate will state who my lawful heirs are at the time of my death. So even if I have another wife, even if I divorce, I have another few children, it doesn't matter, because the time of determining who my lawful heirs are at the time of my death and not at the time when the will was executed. Now, in South Africa, it becomes a big problem. Well, in terms of verse number 11, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يُوصِيكُمُ اللَّهُ فِي أَوْلَادِكُمْ لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنثَيَيْنِ. Right? Now, Allah had ordained the inheritance of your children for the male, double the share of a female. Right? That's an ayah in the Quran. As an African Muslim, I have freedom of testation. Section 25 of the Constitution gives me the right to property, and I draft a will in terms of the Wills Act and so forth. But the same Constitution referred to earlier on, it also says that you cannot discriminate based on a number. So the same way we can practice Islam because they can discriminate against us, we cannot also discriminate, right? So if we draft a will, and the will basically is violating a number of cases that pop up, and I will be speaking about these cases as well. That section in the Constitution, it is part of something referred to as the Bill of Rights. Because before, during the apartheid time, you had very little rights, if no rights. Now they enacted this Constitution, and they say that you have these rights, and you can find it in Chapter 2. These are the Bill of Rights. And the Section 9, it speaks about the equality clauses. And this specific section of Chapter 2 is why many people around the world are saying South Africa has the best right to freedom of religion, freedom of speech. No one can stop you from speaking. Freedom to practice your beliefs, your culture, right? All of these things. And at the same time, under Section 9, it says you cannot discriminate. Right? Now, discrimination in South Africa is a bit of a problem. It basically says, but very important, it says unfair discrimination. So if, for example, I were to say that there's a boys' toilet and there's a girls' toilet, the boys in this, what do you say? The female should go in one toilet and the males go in another toilet. Is that discrimination? It is discrimination, right? Because we're discriminating between people based on their sex or their gender. However, South African law doesn't discrimination. What it does prohibit is unfair discrimination. So if you can prove something is fair, there is a reason behind it. Because and now wants to go into one of these toilets, right? If this matter does come up to the Constitution,